Welcome one, welcome all to the greatest show of them all. This is the NFC East Mixtape. You can listen to this show on any one of SB Nation's NFC East blog podcast networks. That's Blog on the Boys for Dallas Cowboys coverage, Bleeding Green Nation for Philadelphia Eagles, Big Blue View for the New York Giants, and Hogs Haven for the Washington Commanders. You can also watch this show on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel or the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. Make sure to pick the one that you're a fan of so that your YouTube algorithm doesn't get all messed up. This is volume 100 of the NFC East Mixtape. He is Brandon Lee Gowton from BGN. I am RJ Ochoa from BTB. Brandon, a C note for us here on the Mixtape.
Wow, we did it. They said we couldn't get to 100 episodes, and we did. So
I think on the subject of something I just said, I think a C note is the coolest way to describe like piece of money. Like it's obviously a cool piece of money because it's $100 bill, but like what's a nickel? Like that's a stupid word. You know what I mean? Like a C note sounds super cool.
On the piano is, I believe.
Give us the pitch. How does a C note sound?
I don't know how it sounds, but I know it's like the two black. You know where the black keys usually are like in pattern of, not the band, but the pattern of like 2 or 3. I know the C. I can find that one always. I can play 2 songs on the piano.
Hot cross buns.
Yep, hot cross buns and Mary Had a Little Lamb with just the 3 notes. That's all I know. BAG.
Yeah. Anyway, volume 100, triple digits. So now the titles on the thumbnails get, we lose a character. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't have the letter that sometimes goes off the edge. Now we got to be really smart about what we title them because the volume numbers have increased into 3 digits. Wow.
Well, we bring plenty of character to the show. So,
do we have anything we want to get to before we get to the show? Anything that's pending in your life? Actually, can we do a vibe check on the state of Philly fans and Philly fandom? I saw a tweet this morning, Tuesday morning. We're recording this February 21st, from our good friend Seamus Clancy. This is actually kind of a bad thing to say, I guess, on the show, but he tweeted that he hadn't listened to a single podcast.
Well, besides this one, he's obviously listened to the
right. Yeah, so he said, I haven't listened to a single podcast since the Saturday before the Super Bowl. Yeah. So I've never lost the Super Bowl as a football fan because my team hasn't been to one in a very long time. So what's the vibe check? You were pretty morose last week, understandably. So are things improved? Have you started to focus your off-season energy on anything? Like, have you picked up a new hobby? Like, are you binging through some Netflix shows? Like, what's the state of the vibes?
I've heard a lot of people say that it's only gotten like harder for them or more difficult the further as opposed to healing. I definitely took last week to get away from everything as much as I possibly could while still running BGN and everything. I'm still in a spot where it's really, I keep thinking about, it's really hard to think about. And I kind of said this before, but I'll say it again. This is like the best Eagles season of your lifetime, potentially. I'm not saying definitely. I'm not trying to be like negative about that and saying, oh, they'll never be as good, so you should just give up. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, as a testament, as it's not an indictment of future seasons, as a testament to this season, how special it was. Like, you need to kind of, and I said that, even before they lost, I said that going into the playoffs, you need to take a moment to appreciate how special this season is. So it's tough for me to like think about that and also be like, okay, we're just going to move on to any other offseason stuff like you would at the end of any given regular season. Like, we're just going to look into free agency and everything. It's just kind of it's almost like too soon for me to really care about that as much as I usually would. And again, I think that's a personal preference thing. Your mileage will vary. Some people, I think, grieve in different ways, and some people are ready to do that. And I respect that. I get that. I'm not trying to say there's like one right way to feel, but I think if there's anyone out there like me, I can certainly I can empathize with that or sympathize with that. Just not totally ready to dive in and to get into all the analysis yet.
I heard such a great take on Lindsay Rhodes' podcast. She had Albert Breer on last week, and they were obviously talking about the game. And Albert Breer brought up, it's amazing, like what the Super Bowl is. And obviously he's covered a billion of them, but he was talking about like for 2 weeks, both of these teams are like gassed up and hyped up. And I think that like ripples into the fan base, right? Like, so you're doing nothing but like, obviously like hoping to win on some level, expecting to win, and sort of considering like reality if the win happens. And so you're like you're already there. Like, you know what I mean? You're already among like the greatest teams of all time. And then one team wins, and it's like we lock that in, right? So it's like, okay, this team that won is in fact one of the greatest teams of all time, and the other team is just left to kind of process the emotions of not being that team, despite the like 2-week run up, like I talked about. I had never really thought of it that way, but it is strange how like quickly the rug goes out from under you, from like literally one of the greatest teams of all time to just another team.
Yeah, that's the tough part to reconcile because I don't. Again, I don't think you can say just because they didn't win the Super Bowl, this was not like the greatest Eagles team potentially of a lifetime. Like they
Right.
were so historically accomplished. The things they did, it's crazy. You might never see that again. And again, maybe they will. I don't know. It's possible. There's a better team that'll come along. I'm not gonna say that it can't happen in the future, but it's so tough for me to look at next season and be like, it's going to be so tough to. It just feels like there's only room to go down, and not in a negative way, not in like a they're going to be terrible, but just like they could have a really good season next year, like a really good season, and still be like 11-6 or whatever, 10-7. Like that's kind of just the reality and the natural regression of things. So, yeah,
Well, look at
it's a bummer.
that.
I had a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
How do you carry your money? So we were talking about money earlier. Are you like a money clip guy? Have a wallet?
I was a money clip guy in like middle school, because I thought that was cool. So I'm a wallet guy now,
Like,
and
what kind of wallet is it? Like those wallets you see on like Instagram that are like, you need the modern wallet that's like indestructible.
No, it's just like a standard leather wallet.
Yeah,
It is
same.
I guess is it a bifold? Like it folds in half. You know what I'm saying? Like a
I
mouth.
don't know.
Like because I've in the past had a trifold, so like you know what I'm saying? Like it folds in
Yeah, I
3
do the
ways.
trifold.
Okay, so I'm a bifold guy. And actually, while we're on the subject, this is a cool. Let's get into the nitty gritty here. Does the part where the money go, the bills, does it have 2 flaps? Like it has a divider?
It's just the one section for the money, and then there's like a zipper section for like any coins I want to keep in
Oh,
my wallet.
I think keeping coins in a wallet is weird. I'm sorry. Like it just adds
What are you
so
talking
much
about? I
weight.
get some change. I'm not
But
gonna like keep a
you put
ton in there.
the loose change in your pocket. That's what I'm saying.
No,
Like it's like what are you gonna do if you get like 6 coins? That's so many coins to like individually like put in there. Like it's a lot of work. So
just do it.
but I was gonna say, my wallet, the part where the cash goes, has a divider. So there's like 2 halves. So I put the bigger bills, like the 20s and 10s, on the back half, and the 5s and 1s on the front. And
Wow.
if an occasional C note finds its way to RJ Ochoa, it goes in the back. But I definitely have to be organized. It has to make sense. I think it's when people just like shove stuff in. What pocket does your wallet go in?
Typically left because I'm right-handed. What I'll usually do is I'll keep my cell phone in my no, sorry, my wallet and my keys in my left because I don't need those as much typically.
You're
I'm a
talking like
righty.
front pocket or like
Yeah, front pocket. I
even
can't do
even
back.
if you're
That's
wearing like
insane.
jeans or something or like
Yes, I can never do
oh
the
dude,
back pocket. That's
that's
insane. Someone's gonna
strange.
come up from behind you and reach in and and take your wallet. And also, I
No.
don't want to sit on it or anything like that. And then I do front pocket, right side, cell phone, and then my AirPods.
Okay, so I go back right for my wallet, and
That's so terrible.
I go
I
front
want to
right.
reach back there.
I go front right for the keys, and then I put my phone in my front left. While we're like again exploring this here, and I think these are the interesting things, and this is volume 100, so we have to come like with the heavy stuff because everybody has to deal with this. We've talked about what orientation your phone goes if you are watching a video. How do you put your phone in your pocket? Like, does the screen face you? It does, right?
Probably
I think you're doing the same
screen
thing I am.
facing me. Yeah,
So the screen faces me, and the like portion where I hear is closer to the ground.
because you reach in. I don't know. It's just a natural motion. I feel
That's what
like
I'm
you
saying. You
pull
want
it
to like
out.
reach
Yeah,
in and just pull it up and like, wow, like what I'm saying,
yeah.
like a weapon.
And also, I feel like it
Just
protects it a little bit in case you put anything else in your
right.
pocket.
Okay. Wow, that was a good question. Anything
Weigh
else?
in with your answer by leaving a comment on the YouTube page or tweeting at us at Brandon
Hashtag
Gowton and at RJ Ochoa.
hashtag mixtape pocket is the hashtag we're going
There you
with
go.
here. Anything else? It's volume 100. Now's the time to really
I was going to say we should just do an episode that's not even about anything. You would appreciate that as a Seinfeld fan. We're
I
just going to
finally
do a
finished.
podcast about nothing.
I finally finished. I know you're still watching it, so I don't want to ruin it for you. I will just
I'm like
say
season 4 towards the end of it.
all I'll say is like I'm sure you've seen like people say the finale is kind of eh. I agree with that. So
It's every show ever, any finale of any show. No
I
one
was
is ever
thinking
like,
about
wow,
this.
that finale was so good.
The How I Met Your Mother finale was 10 years ago this May, whatever it
Mhm.
is. So we're about to be 10 years removed from the worst one ever. That was a tough pill to swallow. Like I was a big How I Met Your Mother fan, and for a while I defended it just out of loyalty, and then I couldn't anymore. So yeah, tough scene.
Legend.
Nice.
There.
Okay. Anything else for real before we dive into questions about each team? Because it seems
What
like
were
you really don't want to do that.
you're gonna have like burgers or something this week? You said.
I did say that on Monday Football Monday with Pete and Jeremy. We did a special President's Day episode. It was just like off-season rambling, sort of like
You
this.
didn't have a favorite president. I laughed at that.
Thanks. Well, I said they were all, they all had their pros,
Wow,
and
very, very
uh,
non-political answer from you.
but at the end we talked about dinner plans, and Jeremy said he was going to make a lasagna, and he did actually. He sent us a picture. I
I
told him
believe
to.
it. Jeremy's a man of his word.
It was really, really, really good. I'm actually going to send it to you right now if you can buy me 10 seconds.
Sure. Yeah. I made some meatloaf last week. Not bad. And very shocking to me. Surprisingly good. Some cabbage in the oven, some roasted cabbage.
Gross. That's disgusting.
No, dude, it was so much better than I thought it was going to be. It has a funky smell when you cut it up, and it doesn't always look the most appetizing, but
Gross.
man, it was good.
I
Should give
just
it a
sent
try.
you
Roast it in the oven.
this isn't my lasagna. Jeremy Reisman, who runs Pride of Detroit here at SB Nation, he made this from scratch. He said it wasn't. I
Wow.
asked, and you heard. I said, like, is this like a
You
Stouffer's?
can't put this on the overlay for the listener. The
I guess I
audio
could.
and the visual.
Give me a
listeners.
second. Now, give me another second.
It does look pretty good.
I'm just
for
gonna do the first photo. I'm not gonna do the photo of his
Okay.
slice. And I
For the
don't want
audio
people to. Yeah.
it's like nice and browned. Looks super cheesy on top. It looks really good, honestly, especially for a first time. Like, this is a first time. This is really impressive.
Here we go.
Wow. There you go. It's great. It looks great. Good job by Jeremy.
Mean, and like I said, it's straight from the oven, or not obviously straight from the oven, but like he made everything. Like it was like, I mean, I don't know that he like scratch made everything, but
sure,
it wasn't like a pop in the oven Stouffer situation. So good job, Jeremy. He said it was his first time making it, and he said it was amazing.
If you want that recipe, you can tweet on it at him. Detroit on Lion, Jeremy Reisman.
We should have Jeremy on at some point. I mean, like, why not? You know what I mean? Like, we have all of our SB Nation friends and colleagues. You know what I mean? So,
hey, but what's the angle?
The angle is the Lions are the team who's going to host the Eagles in the playoffs next year.
Okay.
Okay. Questions about each team. Since we recorded, actually, like an hour after we recorded last week, Jonathan Gannon was announced as the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Everybody had all sorts of jokes to make about him and his, like, what was it, the moment with Kyler Murray? I thought it was I really thought it was not a joke, but I thought like that was like something somebody else made at first. Like I was like, there's no way this is real. He does look like Kendall Roy from Succession. I don't know if you watch that show, but like it was the suit choice, like the fact that it was like a light heather gray. It just really looked like a dude straight off of Wall Street.
I heard Pee Wee Herman comparisons.
So he's gone. He already has his coordinators picked out. And he's taking the Eagles linebackers coach. Is that correct to be his new defensive coordinator?
Yeah, youngest coordinator in the NFL. He's only like 29.
Yeah, so that will make not you, but make anybody feel pretty unaccomplished in life. But yeah. So Jonathan Gannon's gone. Obviously, we knew that Shane Steichen was gone. So this is the price you pay, obviously. And I know that everybody's like, "Oh, thank God, Jonathan Gannon's gone." But like, this is the biggest question: is like, can the Eagles survive the turnover that is inevitably going to happen? Obviously, losing both coordinators, and we'll see what other members of the coaching staff leave. Obviously, free agency is going to come and go. I've decided in my head that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is probably going to return. I don't know if you agree with that, but like he seems to be the one. Like you can't have them all. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know that Fletcher Cox is back or Brandon Graham is back and things like that. But CJ, kind of feels like the one that is going to be back of the kind of prized free agent, so to speak. Feels like Bradbury's gone. I don't know. Those are my questions. I don't know if they're all fair or one is fair, none are, whatever.
One of the tricky things about the Eagles free agent class is that they have a lot of players at like the same positions. For example, you brought up Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, both free agents. Are you going to let both of them walk? TJ Edwards and Kaiser White, are you going to let both of those linebackers walk? Marcus Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You let both of those safeties walk. So it almost feels like you have to keep at least one at each position. You don't necessarily have to. You could have someone in free agency that you have your eye on that you feel good about or feel like you can get at a cheaper price. I think the CJ-GJ thing is tough because
so hard to say. That's why I can't. CJ-GJ, it's really difficult. It's easy to write, but difficult to say.
it's tough from a standpoint of I don't think you can fall into the I've seen some people be like, well, how could you let him walk after you traded for him? Well, first of all, the Eagles didn't give up a ton for him. Second of all, like that's sunk cost fallacy. I don't think you have to sign him just because you traded for him.
Plus, get the
And
comp pick.
well, yeah, and third is I don't know that the value is going to be great from a standpoint of he led the NFL in interceptions, and some of those were like, you know, right place, right time. Some of those were good plays by him for sure, but I just feel like you're kind of have to you're paying like premium like price, and I don't know that you necessarily want to make that bet because you may have already seen the best out of CJ-GJ, and I like him as a player to be clear. And I think he got better at safety as the season went along. I think he kind of had some nice moments in the Super Bowl. I think he's the kind of player you would want to bet on in terms of age. And even though some of that interception production was fortuitous, he is historically a player who like gets his hand on the ball. He has a track record of like being like a ball hawk kind of player. And you see guys like that, like guys typically who have a lot of high pass deflections, decent amount of interceptions each year. That's like there's some level of sustainability there. There's something to be said. Like he gets his hands on the ball. So I agree. He's kind of the top profile guy. I just, with anything, these numbers have to like be sensible. You can't be like resetting the safety market with CJ-GJ. That's just not like a realistic price tag for him. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard because there's so many of these key guys. ESPN's top list of 50 free agents that they put out today from Matt Bowen has 7 Eagles on it. So, like a lot of key players.
So Chauncey had 6 interceptions this past season, which is more than he had in his entire career to that point. He had 5
Do you know what
in his 3
him
seasons.
and Dak Prescott have in common?
I don't know.
Led the NFL in interceptions this year.
Nice. Good for you. So again, 1 interception, 3 interceptions, 6 interceptions as far as his career. So you're right. It has a bit of a reputation to be around the ball, but there is likely regression coming in that sense. I think a good example of that is a different Cowboy, Trayvon Diggs. And that was something that we talked a lot about last year. There was no way he was going to come close to that 11 interception mark that he had, obviously, in 2021. And you can argue that he should have had a few more in 2022, but do you know off the top of your head how many picks he had in 2022, Trayvon Diggs?
I don't want to guess like 4.
3. So, I mean, and obviously 11 is ridiculous. I mean, 11 is impossible to live up to. 6 is a little bit easier. I mean, not that anything is easy, but I mean, that's just the name that made the most sense to me. But you're right. Like, I think he's kind of a microcosm for the idea you talked about, right? Like, maybe this is the best Eagles team that will ever live. Like, you probably got the best version of him.
Yep.
And I think you got the best version of him. You probably got the best version of Hassan Reddick. Like, you could argue that you got the best version that you'll ever see from Jalen Hurts. I think his floor is much higher than either of those players, and he obviously has much more influence on that. But that's kind of like the face of the question surrounding the Eagles, I think, over the next few months. So what's your guess then? Chauncey back, not back? Like, if you have to really, is he the most likely to return? If I can get my words out.
I mean, I think Brandon Graham is the most likely to return from the standpoint of, I think.
Okay, well, most likely as far as, no offense to BLGs, but like serious, significant contributors.
Well, he's a significant contributor. He double-digit sacks, but I get what you're saying. From the ones who, I mean, I think people like talk about he might not be back. I just think he will from the standpoint of local. I mean, he lives here now, not local, like where he's from. But anyway, I guess I think because like, I don't know. It feels like they could go with Epps if they just feel like we need to be more judicious about our spending, and maybe we really want to keep, let's say, like Javon Hargrave instead, and we value the defensive line more than we do the secondary. I do think Bradbury just seems like a lock for me to be gone because people want to talk about. I think fans kind of romanticize the idea of like players taking less money because like they like it here or they want to win. Like that matters to like some extent, more than 0%, but it just doesn't matter compared to the money, which is like 95% of what players care about. And Bradbury was put in the spot last year where he kind of got screwed because the Giants released him way after the new league year started. So everyone kind of had already spent the money that they would have had to spend. And he had to sign a deal with the Eagles that wasn't like a terrible deal for him, but it was nowhere close to where he probably could have gotten if he had gotten cut earlier. So I think he just really wants to, chase the money. And if it's close, like I'm sure if the Eagles are like, maybe like $1 million under than what another team, yeah, maybe he'll stay. But I just think someone's going to have an offer that blows the Eagles out of the water with him.
I think if you're James Bradbury, if you're Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, if you are maybe Javon Hargrave, like your earning power or your earning potential right now is higher than it probably ever will be. Right. Like, I mean, and so like, you're right. Like you have to capitalize on that. That's why, like, I always thought it was so great. And I brought him up before, my friend Jimmy, not Jimmy Kemsky. But my friend Jimmy brought up after the 2018 season, after the Cowboys traded for Amari Cooper. He was like, why doesn't this dude hold out? He was like, he will never have as much like, negotiating power as he does right now. He was eligible for a new deal and he didn't. And he never had that level of I don't call it worth, but that level of negotiation. He did still get a big time contract, obviously, but like he came in and changed the team. Like you could argue that he could have held the team over a barrel, whatever, especially after they'd given up a first round pick for him. And so like along those lines, like every player get the bag, like totally, of that mindset, regardless who they play for. So yeah, it's hard to see, these guys turning down these big offers that, I wonder, do any of them, we're talking about defensive players, do any of them follow Jonathan Gannon or any of them Cardinals in the future? Like they're obviously in a different state as a franchise, but if the money's right, the money's right.
Well, especially as the linebackers, I mentioned Kaiser White and TJ Edwards. I think the Eagles will try to keep Edwards more so. But Kaiser White, someone who was just with Nick Rallis in the position room. So not only Gannon, but his old position coach as well. Definitely something to watch. Then it's not like the Eagles have so many free agents on offense, but still, like the Shane Steichen connection, having a familiarity with him, that'll be something to watch with the Colts as well. And these teams that hire away from the Eagles. And then there's obviously connections to like Joe Douglas is a little bit further removed now from the Eagles, but him with the Jets and then Andrew Berry with the Browns, like, all these people hiring away from the Eagles that kind of lends to, or even Brandon Brown with the Giants, who got hired as their assistant GM last year. Like all these little connections can kind of lead to some of these guys ending up in new homes. I did want to talk about defensive coordinator a little bit because there's kind of been some buzz on that. I don't know how abreast you've been kept, RJ, of the Eagles offensive coordinator situation, but it looks like the word is that Brian Johnson, the Eagles quarterbacks coach, will be promoted to replace Shane Steichen. And I feel good about that. Brian Johnson's been really impressive. I thought whenever he's had the chance to be in front of Eagles reporters, he's been an offensive coordinator before, including for Dak once upon a time at Mississippi State, or working with him there in a quarterback capacity. Also worked with Kyle Trask at Florida. Also used to be an offensive coordinator at Utah once upon a time. But defensive coordinator is the interesting one because Eagles are looking for they're looking at multiple candidates at that spot. They're looking at Sean Desai, who is the Bears defensive coordinator, kind of has that Vic Fangio influence. They're looking at Vance Joseph, who they're talking to this week from the Cardinals. And they're also said to be looking at a couple new candidates as of sorry, I forgot Jim Leonard as well, who's kind of been like a really interesting name.
The big name and big thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Really intriguing. And then Chris Shula and Jesse Minter as well. So they're kind of looking all around here. It seems like they might just stick with Denard Wilson, who I know the Eagles were like comfortable with promoting last year had Gannon gotten a head coaching job.
Right. I know you wasn't there. It was a tweet you retweeted, right? Like it was like it was, I don't know if it was your line or something. There was something about how like you said like you wouldn't be shocked if he was the guy. If
Gannon that was
left
back in like training camp.
Right.
And Gannon was talking up or it just has in the past. Gannon has called Denard Wilson his right-hand man. And I think the Eagles do. It's not like they want to like necessarily keep 100% of what Gannon was doing because they're different people. You're not going to keep 100% of it. But I do think they want to keep like some of the defensive philosophy intact, which I don't know that Eagles fans will be very excited about. But I think that's what makes Wilson a likely candidate.
Mm. Um, okay. Well, thoughts. There's still like there are questions, but there are still some things like percolating. Like obviously the coordinators have to be like officially announced and things like that before like I think you can start to I don't say emotionally move forward, but before like things can be known, there's still a little bit of ambiguity hovering around the Eagles right now. For what it's worth, by the way, I also saw in Peter King's Football Morning in America this week, he speculated that he does not think the Eagles will be the Week 1 opener for the Chiefs. So,
Yeah, I
I
saw
know we
that.
talked about that last week. So, we'll see. I forgot who he said he thought it would be. But all the other games just are kind of meh to me. Like, I also think like I know it would be emotional, but like I'm a big believer that that game should be of as little consequence as possible. Like I think week
Okay.
one should be the is it intra conference, like opposite conferences. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's
Like I
inter
okay, well,
inter.
like we've brought this up before. Like I hate when you have like Cowboys. I know we petitioned for Cowboys Eagles week one, but like when you have to play two divisional games the first 2 weeks of the season, like stuff like that
Well, it
is dumb.
shouldn't be.
So
Yeah, it
that
shouldn't be the 2 first weeks. That'd be
well,
crazy.
that's what I'm saying. Like it. So Chiefs Eagles, I know it would be emotional, but it is technically as little meaning as possible for both teams. So that's that's a plus, I guess, if it
Mm.
winds up being that. But okay, any more Eagles questions?
Um, no. I mean, there's a lot,
um,
but not
right,
like
right, 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 right.
we kind of
Headlining
talked about
questions.
it.
As far as the Cowboys are concerned, when we were talking about this, you were like, "There's not really much there." There isn't, as
No.
far as well, there's not a lot. It's kind of quiet right now. Obviously, things will pick up as the combine approaches and gets
Mhm.
closer. You mentioned ESPN's top free agents. They launched an article today, the day we're recording Tuesday. I wrote about this. They had suggested fits for all of the players as well.
Mhm.
And Dalton Schultz was on there. He was the like highest ranking member of the Cowboys on there. And they had the Chargers as a suggested fit. So it remains to be seen if Schultz is going to follow Kellen Moore there. That makes sense,
Right.
especially because it feels unlikely that they would tag him. I'll get to that in a moment. Tony Pollard was on there. Their suggested fit was the Cowboys. There's all sorts of murmuring. Like there was a report last week from Adam Schefter that Ezekiel Elliott's representation is going to, I guess, like talk to people at the combine and gauge his value to sort of figure out if he wants
I've
to
got
take a
some bad
pay.
news, Zeke.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not here to trash Zeke or whatever. Like, it's been such a like contentious argument among Cowboys fans for a long time. It's been a fun era. It's been a fun time. We've had some good times, but like, it's just I will be a little bit disappointed if the Cowboys don't do anything. I will even be a tiny bit disappointed if they restructure him because, like, dude,
Mm.
like, in any like moment for Zeke is a moment against everybody else. Like he's not an explosive playmaker on your team, and you have to come to terms with that. And it does feel like Mike McCarthy has slowly been winning that battle. As Zeke has obviously gotten a little bit older. So we'll see. But if I had to guess right now, and this is just my own personal guess, it isn't any kind of report or anything, I would guess they move on. But I mean, again, it
Mm.
would be really I think it is telling that they're even willing to kind of leak what they are leaking about him. Like he is a favorite of the organization, and so that they're willing to come this close says a lot. But so also on that list at number 26 was Odell Beckham Jr., who's currently a free agent, obviously.
Here we are, still
And
talking about this.
well,
Such a waste of time. All that stuff
I'm
in season was so dumb.
I'm just saying his suggested fit, obviously by ESPN, was the Cowboys. And I'm just here to say this is going to be a thing until he's on a new team. And he's going to be on a new team, right? Like time will tell who that is. And I, Odell represents to me what I want in the sense that I want the Cowboys to attack the wide receiver position with vigor this offseason. Now, to be very clear, if you ask me, RJ, who do you want the Cowboys to draft with the 26th overall pick? It would be Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State,
Yeah, I
who
think
I
he's really
interviewed.
good.
But yeah, he's awesome. And you can listen to our interview with him on the Black on the West podcast network or the YouTube channel. He's obviously from the Dallas area. He said it would love to be drafted by the Cowboys. Big shocker. That would be my favorite, kind of path forward for them at this point. But that's why, like, if they sign Odell, if Keenan Allen's cut, they sign him. If they trade for DeAndre Hopkins, anything like that, it gives them all the more flexibility in the world. I don't want them to be pigeonholed. I don't want them to be stuck. I don't want there to be all this pressure on JSN if he's the hypothetical pick to come in and immediately carry things opposite of CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, if it's Odell, if it's somebody else, like sign me up. That's what I really want more than anything.
Yeah, you can't just rely on a rookie receiver either. Like in theory, they could come in, have a big impact. Not going to say it's impossible, but it's not something you can just rely on. Like, that's not a good strategy. If that's your only strategy, it's just not, because I think receivers can take time sometimes.
Sure.
And they might be like a nice player right away, but they're not ready to, like you said, kind of carry the offense. I know CD's there, so he doesn't necessarily have to do that. But again, might just be better suited to be kind of a role player than a feature player in year one. So yeah, definitely think it would be important to attack it, like you said, with multiple kind of options. I don't love, but that's the same kind of thing. Like, if Odell Beckham Jr. is your only move, that's just not good enough. I think that's
Well,
not
if
good enough.
to me, it's like if it's Odell and you're hoping that Michael Gallup is better his second year post injury, and it would be very difficult for Jalen Tolbert to be worse as a second year player than he was as a
Yeah,
rookie.
but he might just be bad.
Right. I mean, that's obviously, but like my point is, like, that raises your floor. Like, if even if it's Odell, like, it is a lot of attention, obviously, and if you feel like you can live up to it, obviously go for it. The reward is high, so is the risk.
I don't know
And
if it
so
is, man. I don't really know if it is, though.
I
I
mean,
really am
it
not sure
isn't.
about
It
that.
is theoretically, like, you know what I mean, like, and so, and if you don't have to pay a lot of money, like, and I will say this, and I know everybody laughs at this, but like, I do trust them. I mean, they walked away from Odell, which it was a very non-Cowboys thing to do. Do you not agree with that? Like, they walked away mid-season, and they were proven right. It's not like he
Well,
signed
so
with
did
the
everyone. It
Bills.
wasn't just them.
I know, but it's not. That's my point. It's not like he signed with the Bills or whatever. Like, they, even though nobody else signed him, like, they walked away. They kept control of the situation. They didn't allow themselves to be swayed by the emotion and the attention of it all. And they, just like everybody else, was proven to be right. So, good for them in that sense. Other free agents, I'm working on something right now. I kind of am intrigued by the idea of Patrick Peterson. I don't know if you remember this. In the fall of 2021, I think he did an interview with The Athletic. I can't remember who it was with. And he talked about, at that time, that was his first season in Minnesota, the Cowboys, Niners, and Eagles all reached out to him. So I think he's an important name to kind of watch as if James Bradbury leaves, obviously. The Cowboys have a need at corner opposite of Trayvon Diggs. He, kind of a 1 year rental guy, like kind of a ring chasing dude at this point in time. Like, I would love that for the Cowboys. And again, alleviates their need to maybe prioritize corner in the first round.
Okay. Little Patrick Peterson. He's kind of been a big Philly antagonist in terms of one of the players probably I've seen most get into it with the crowd, regardless of what team he's been on. I think he kind of enjoys it. But
I think he's an antagonist in general. Like, remember when,
sure.
was it this past season, when they beat the Cardinals? I think it was this past season. And then he did the, like, yeah, it had to have been. And he did the, like, video game celebration.
Okay.
Talking
Vaguely
about, like,
familiar.
well, he did it, like, and he was obviously, like, poking at Kyler Murray and the Call of Duty stuff and the clause in the contract, whatever. But it's like, dude, that was your teammate. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's one thing to be, like, antagonistic towards, like, the Eagles or whatever, like, whatever team you're playing. But, like, and I understand he had some, like, bitterness towards the Cardinals and how things ended there. But it's like, that wasn't Kyler's fault. I mean, maybe it was, but you know what I mean? Like, it was just, I think he's just that guy.
I think I do agree. There's some level he's just that guy, but I think it's fair to kind of like roast your teammate who might not have been like working as hard as you and kind of like putting your hard work to spoil because like they're not taking it seriously enough.
My last thing, kind of question on the Cowboys, and then we'll get to the Giants and Commanders, is we're recording this on Tuesday, February 21st. Today is the day that teams can start to place the franchise tag on players. If we do see that happen, obviously somebody will get tagged. It probably won't be for the next, I don't know.
There's no reason to do it now.
Right. You have 15 days in the NFL, obviously. And so the candidates, I would say, for the Cowboys from least to most likely, I mean, we included these in our options, but they're not happening. Donovan Wilson on an expiring contract has been was a great player for them this past season, but I just have a hard time seeing that happen. But again, it is technically an option. Leighton Vander Esch is probably their most important free agent to keep. But the tag for linebackers is just north of $20 million. So really have a hard time seeing them do that.
No one's going to get tagged on the Cowboys, is what you're trying to say.
What?
No one's going to get tagged on the Cowboys.
Well, Dalton Schultz got tagged last year. And actually, the Cowboys have tagged 2 players in a row twice before Schultz. DeMarcus Lawrence got tagged 2 years in a row, and then Dak got tagged 2 years in a row, and then Schultz. So they kind of have a history of this. But the second tag, obviously, is 120% of the first. So it'd be $13 million. I don't see that happening. So again, like, Dalton, you want to follow Kellen to the Chargers, by all means, go ahead. But the most likely is probably Tony Pollard. The value is about $11 million.
Yeah.
But like you and I have talked about this, like, I'm not going to be disappointed, certainly, if they tag him. And if they do it, we'll suggest that they are confident in, his injury and the recovery and things like that. But if they don't, I think I lean towards not tagging him. Like, I'm not quite 51-49. I might be like 53-47 towards not tagging him. Like, I can definitely make the case towards doing it, but I'd be fine if they just reset, or like you said, if they let him test the market, brought him back, whatever the case may be.
I think the Cowboys would be in very good shape, like from terms of a process making standpoint. Like, this is a smart kind of what a smart team would do if they cut Zeke, no restructure, no pay cut, outright cut him, and again, in theory, if you wanted to bring him back in terms of like he sat out there in the market, no one's paying him, you could bring him back at a later date at a cheap count. That's maybe okay, but point being, cut Zeke, and then just don't even pay Pollard again, unless same situation. You're letting him sit out there in the market, and you can bring him back on like a reasonable 1-year deal. Then sure, but if they put any kind of big resources into the running back position, I just think that shows they don't get it, and that includes Bijan Robinson, because I know that's been a lot, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more leading up to the draft, which we'll have plenty of time for that. But I've seen like just talk.
There are so many people who in the same breath. So many people in the same breath will be like, they need to let Zeke walk and draft Bijan Robinson. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like,
that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. Like, that process doesn't make. That's not what a smart team. Like, you don't need to invest major resources into the running back position. Like, the Cowboys, it'll show me they're being smart if they do not do that.
Last thing here, and then we'll move on. But Jane Slater just tweeted right now in real time for you and I that former Cowboys running backs coach Skip Peete is headed to the Buccaneers to be their running backs coach. And so if the Cowboys do move on from Zeke, obviously, that would be like a connection, right? Everybody be like, maybe the Bucs, Skip Peete is there, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Is there a team? And if so, who is it? So two, questions. Obviously, one is contingent on the other. Is there a team that if Zeke winds up on you, you would be like, I don't know, man, just like a tiny little bit nervous, or are you just at the point where it's like, nah?
I mean,
what if he's on like the Bills or the Chiefs?
Not really. I mean, if he goes somewhere as like a complimentary piece, and I mean, it's not like scary, but it's like, oh, that could be a nice pickup. It could be. He has the potential to be a good value for someone, depending in the right situation. And again, if they play it right and they kind of let him sit out there in free agency and he goes unsigned for a bit, there could be a point where he's getting so overrated that he's actually a little underrated in that sense. But I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, then we talked Eagles, we talked Cowboys. Let's take a break and hear a word from our sponsors. Welcome back. While we were gone, Brandon, you said that you started a new show on Netflix. What is it?
I wish I did. I mean, I don't have the time for that. I'm watching Seinfeld. I'm still working through.
I watched Full Swing, their golf documentary. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Wow.
But I'm a golf fan.
You like golf?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm not a Drive to Survive person. Have you ever watched it?
No.
I know we've talked about like not having the bandwidth for that. But
that's what F1.
Yeah, I struck an agreement with Michael
like
Kist. Right.
Got him.
I struck an agreement with Michael Kist, aka the boss around here, and Kist agreed to watch Full Swing if I agreed to start Drive to Survive. So
Kist has this big like F1 TikTok thing, which I don't understand.
Kist is wild on.
I don't even want to like get into that because like what's going on? I don't even know what's happening here.
Yeah, I agree. Like the first time I saw one, I was like, "What's this?" I checked it out. They had like 300,000 likes.
I don't know what's happening.
Kist is like a god.
I saw him tweeting TikTok about that, and I thought it was like a bit, and it's not a bit.
It's definitely, and it was one, Kist, if you're listening, I mean this in a complimentary way, but where he listens. Kist, if you're listening, tell Brandon that you listen.
He's too important.
But he was holding a Nintendo Switch, but like the controllers and acting like a like a wheel. Like it was such a great like impersonation that he was doing. It was really, really, really fun.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
So shout out to Michael Kist, aka the boss. Okay, we have to go in divisional order. So any questions about the New York Giants? There is this, you have to be really careful around this time of year, like the reports and rumors and things like that. But Daniel Jones, I don't know if you saw this in the midst of your like hibernation that you're in. Daniel Jones switched agencies, obviously an important offseason for him, maybe the most important one of his life. And there were the reports that he wants $45 million a year. Obviously, that's market rate. So, like, what a shock. Daniel Jones wants to be paid like market rate. What a ridiculous ask. Tough times for the Giants. They're going to have to figure this thing out.
I was reading Big Blue View. Our good friend Ed Valentine and he was talking about how he definitely takes the Daniel Jones switching agents thing to be a signal that like negotiations are not starting in a like, smooth. It's like this is not a fait accompli, if you will. Like this is a real negotiation, and it
Mhm.
seems like the sides are not necessarily close at the beginning. It doesn't mean they can't get there, but at the outset, there it's not like a foregone conclusion that this is going to get done. There's a couple ways to think about this, and I want to get your take on it, RJ. That's what we do here on the podcast, after all.
We
Um,
talk about the
we talk about
teams
things,
here,
you know, we
right?
give
That's
takes, but
generally the premise of a podcast, right?
it's almost better. I feel like it's bad in the short term if they tag him because this you don't in a perfect world, as you know, with the Cowboys, like, you don't want to have a quarterback on such a high cap number because ideally you just sign him if you believe in him to a long term deal. But I don't know. I think maybe that you want to see one more year out of Daniel Jones, especially in a situation where he'll have some more talent around him than he did, presumably, in 2022. Like, I'm not out on Daniel Jones. I think a lot of people kind of are, especially from seeing like the temperature of Eagles fans who are like, haha, you know, Daniel Jones sucks. And I'm like, he's definitely not anywhere as good as, you know, like these top quarterbacks, at least in terms of being proven. But I also don't think, again, he's still like a lost cause by any means. And he had a really decent season. Like he stopped turning the ball over. I think he get a playoff win in Minnesota. Like, I don't know. I think it's not insane to me that like I wouldn't move on from him if I was the Giants, but I don't know that you can sign him to this $45 million extension. That seems like a little much. So I would almost think the tag could be the best thing. Play it out one more year. I mean, the real mistake here was just not picking up his fifth year option. They probably just should have done that. I know that he wasn't looking great prior to that, but the upside versus the downside in that situation, it just seemed like the upside was worth it there. Um, what do you think?
I have a lot of takes. First of all, now a win in Minnesota is impressive. All of a sudden, when
I
you
mean,
hated on
like
them forever,
in
whatever.
terms of like quarterback accomplishments for the Giants relative to what the Giants have been able to
No,
do.
look,
We're
I
talking
believe
about
it's
the team that's
impressive.
been the
I
worst
just
team in
think
the league since 2017.
I
That's
believe it's
actually a
impressive.
decent
I
win for
just think the
them.
hypocrisy happening here is funny. So
I
that's
think
my
it's a
first thing.
decent win for a team that's the worst team in the league. It's a very low
My
bar, to be
my
clear.
second thing here is I think it's hindsight certainly to say that they should have picked up the fifth-year option. But
I don't
I
know.
do think that if you're taking a quarterback in the first round, you are like you have to know then like we're picking up his fifth-year option in what is it 3 years? Like you know what I'm saying? We're, like you have to be committed to that point unless it's a Josh Rosen situation. You know what I'm saying? Like unless
Yeah,
you've
or he
literally
gets
cut the
like
player, right?
catastrophically hurt.
Um,
Yeah.
right. So I mean, that's that. Like, do you think the I know we're still a year away, but like, should the Niners pick up Trey Lance's fifth-year option next year? You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to
No,
be committed to that to some degree, but like that's one of the like levels of extenuating
that's a different
circumstances.
thing. Yeah.
So I think it's hindsight to say that. I think this is a problem clearly, but this is the best problem you could have had, right? Like that's some important context. This is the best problem you could, and this is a problem that is a testament to the coach of the year, Brian Dable. I played this game on my podcast, the Ochoa, last week on the Block on the Voice side of things. So I think the three top quarterbacks, if you want to put it in the NFC, are and order them however you want: Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins. I think those are the three best quarterbacks in the conference. And for the sake of this argument, let's presume that Aaron Rodgers is traded to the AFC or retired. Like he's not on the Packers in
Yeah.
this hypothetical. Who is number 4? Because I think there's an argument that it's Daniel Jones. Like maybe it's Kyler Murray if things break right. Maybe it's Matthew Stafford if things break right. Maybe it's Brock Purdy if things break right. I don't think we have enough data to like fully say that yet. Maybe it's Jared Goff
I would
if
say
things break
golf
right.
in terms of like I still don't fully believe in him in terms of like isolated situation, but in that it's kind of like the Jimmy G thing a little bit where like Jimmy G was not a kind of a top 6 quarterback or top 5 quarterback, but the 49ers would consistently have like a top 6 offense or
Okay.
whatever
So
with
then
him.
he's fifth though, at worst, right? Daniel Jones is. I think he's fifth,
Um
even if you include Aaron Rodgers in this assessment, like in terms of who they are as players right now. And so, like
yeah,
I don't think it should be like, well, he's the fifth best quarterback in the NFC. Like, give him 45. Like, that's not my point. My point is like
right.
he's a much better option than like basically any sort of alternative. And I agree with you. Like, oh, in a perfect world, you tag him and he proves it to you again. But like another game I like to play mentally is like, okay, we have new jobs all of a sudden, Brandon.
Mhm.
Our job is to get the most money possible for Daniel Jones. All right. Now Daniel Jones comes to us, BLG, RJ, Not sure what's up with all the acronyms around here, but the Giants, they want to tag me. Should I play on it? My advice would be no. Hell no. You can't play on the tag. Like I talked about Amari Cooper in the 2019 offseason. Like your earning power is higher now than it will ever be. You are not going to play on this tag, Daniel. That would be my advice. Why would he do it? Why would he play on the tag? Especially like, people.
Oh, he shouldn't. I'm not saying it's a good move for him, but
Well,
I'm
that's
just
what I'm saying.
looking at
Like,
it from the team perspective.
Like, how does it? Of course, from a team perspective, if we wanted to play for as few dollars as possible, duh. But like, I don't think he should play on the tag. Like, I think if you're Daniel Jones, you absolutely have every right to ask for market rate, and
Sure.
that's what this comes down to. And so, I don't know that the Giants can pay him that. Like, I mean, I really don't know. But what is the other option? I mean, like, what is the other like? Do you disagree with this? The Giants could win the Super Bowl next year. They could, right? Like they certainly could. And so, like, but if they take a significant step backwards, as silly as this sounds, if Daniel Jones is not their quarterback, because like, okay, they let him walk, whatever. What's the path?
They're not
like,
gonna let him walk, yeah.
But what do they do? Like Derek Carr? That's you know what I mean? Like you're moving on from Daniel Jones to Derek Carr to save $14 million a year. Like that's what this is about. I think you have to pay him. You're stuck.
I think you have to tag him, and I think you have to play hardball. And he's gonna cave. He's gonna play at some point. It's not gonna be pretty, but I think that's what you have to do with him. I think that's the move. It's worth noting that former NFL GM Mike Tannenbaum told our good friend Ed Valentine, aforementioned, that he expects Daniel Jones to get franchise tagged. And look, just because you do that, as you know, that doesn't mean the negotiating is over. You can still, you have extra time now to talk through, and maybe you can use that extra time to work out a deal that makes sense. But I do think you have to tag him because I just don't think you can sign him to a long-term deal yet. I just don't think there's been enough evidence, especially it's tough because like the number thing isn't fully, it's not like fully relevant. It's not like, hey, we love Daniel Jones at $35 million, but we hate him at $45 million. Like, I don't know, like either you like him or you don't. But I still think there's, because of kind of the unique situation of how I think he realistically kind of did as much as he could with what he was working with last year. I think you want to see another year and then decide if you can sign him or not to this big long-term deal.
I mean, how does this end well? In the history of the franchise tag, do you know the quarterbacks that have been tagged?
It's like what, Kirk and Dak, and although I would say the Giants should draft a quarterback too. They absolutely should.
So I'm looking at Spotrack's history here. They sort of.
I'm glad you said it correctly. Because a lot of people say Sport Rack, and it's not Sport Rack.
How could you say? I think some people say Spot Track, but it's Spotrack.
I've seen people, or at least like I've seen people
that
type
would
it
literally
out as Sport Rack.
And so they put the R first. That's stupid.
Well, it's kind of confusing though because it's about sports, so I get like why it would like there's some kind of
but it's also tracking information. It's anyway. So their earliest documentation of a quarterback getting franchise tagged is Steve Young in 1993. But he was ultimately extended. Peyton Manning was tagged in 2004, ultimately extended. Man, at the time, Peyton was extended to a 7-year deal for $98 million. Just what a world. Drew Brees was tagged in 2005. Obviously, that was the final year of his tenure with the Chargers, San Diego at the time, and then was a free agent the following year. This was a really interesting one. Matt Castle was tagged in 2009 after that season he played for Tom Brady when he tore his ACL in week 1. Obviously, he wound up playing for the Chiefs. Peyton Manning was tagged in 2011. It was ultimately given a 5-year, $90 million extension, which they had to get out of a year later after the injury situation. Michael Vick was tagged in 2011. That was the Eagles tagging him. I forgot about this. And ultimately signed an extension with Philly. And then it gets to more modern times, which is crazy to say that 2011 is not modern. Drew Brees was tagged in 2012 and then did sign the extension. Remember, he had those contractual issues, and then it was like, oh, how are the Saints in such a bad salary cap situation? But to your point, the most recent examples, Kirk Cousins, who was tagged 2 years in a row, and Dak Prescott, who was tagged 2 years in a row. Dak obviously ultimately got an extension with the Cowboys. Kirk did not get one with Washington and wound up signing in free agency for the Vikings and has made a lot of money ever since. So yeah, like you love to play the like what is precedent game? Like what is the precedent that this most likely follows? Dak, Kirk, Brees. I mean, like
that's your question?
Yeah, like
oh.
Actually, my first question is...
I think it's a unique situation. Do you disagree with me? That's a unique situation, though. I don't think it's a standard situation. I think it's a tough spot. I just don't think you can... I don't
I
think
think
you're ready to commit all those years to him.
I think where it's also unique is
I don't think he's proved enough. He's proved enough to get like one more year, but I don't think he's done enough beyond that.
so looking at it, by the way, Dak really won as far as like against teams like the other extensions that were signed by quarterbacks who were tagged, who signed deals with their team. The shortest one was 5 years. Breeze got one, Vic got one, Peyton got one, and so did Steve Young. Dak won a 4-year deal, and
He
that was
still
after.
caved too early. He should have waited
I
because they
know, but
couldn't
I
tag
mean,
him a
like,
third time.
but my point is, like, if anyone beat the team, it was Dak.
More so.
Certainly, but even then, so Dak was not a first round pick. Obviously, Kirk not a first round pick. Drew
Mhm.
Brees was a second round pick, but not even by the team who tagged him. Michael Vick was a first round pick, but not by the team who he was
Mhm.
tagged by. So the only sort of, I guess, precedent as far as being a first round pick tagged by the team who drafted you is Peyton Manning, who was tagged twice in 2004 and 2011. Holy crap. I just did the math here, by the way. Man, the Colts suck, dude. The Colts tagged Peyton in 2004 and ultimately worked out a 7-year deal and then had to tag him when that
At the
deal
end.
expired. Like, what a horribly ran organization.
The other
So
thing with Daniel Jones, and if you tag him, I guess though, is like, then what do you do with Saquon? Because it seems like it kind of might be ideal to tag Saquon. Like you get one more year out of him. You don't sign him to that long-term
that's the most
extension.
ideal usage. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, I think you have to accept that you're gonna have to pay Daniel Jones. So like I think the like path of least resistance towards most likely success for the because like people say path of least resistance all the time, but that second half of that sentence is important. I think the path of least resistance to most likely success is getting a long-term deal done with Daniel Jones, biting the bullet, and tagging Saquon. That's it. That's if the Giants do that, I'm legitimately concerned heading into 2023.
I guess maybe I'm overstating the concern about paying with Daniel Jones in that, like, I look at how the Eagles and the Rams got out of, these
Mm-hmm.
Jared Goff and
When they got
um,
out, they paid him in 2019, right? And they both
both.
got out in
Mhm.
2021. I
Yep.
mean,
The
not even 2 full years later. And they
the
both got compensation for them.
well, the Rams had to give up a bit more,
Still, I mean,
certainly, but
like
yes.
even if they got nothing, they both got out ultimately.
Well, and the Rams won the Super Bowl in
Right.
part obviously because of that trade
And the
and
Eagles,
upgrading.
while they didn't win the Super Bowl, at
They
least
got to the
yet,
Super Bowl.
they're still they went to the Super Bowl to your point, and they're still
Yeah.
reaping the benefits
All
of
right.
the draft capital.
All right. Never mind. I changed my mind. You don't. Well, I mean, I still think you should tag him. Well, I don't know. Maybe. Well,
No,
if you
because you
can't.
if you
Well,
didn't
here's what you
have
can do.
if you didn't have Saquon as another variable, I would totally agree with you. Like you tag
Well, there's
him, buy
multiple tags
time,
you can
figure it
use
out.
though. You can put like potentially use the transition tag on Saquon or the franchise on just in case you can't get because here's the thing. It does seem like there's going to be hardball here. So like I don't know. And the time is ticking on this Daniel Jones thing. So if you're not confident you can get a deal done, then I think you have to use one of the tags, not as like your plan, but as to give you more time and to kind of get that in place and then work out the extension. And then so maybe you place like the franchise tag on Daniel Jones and then the
Transition
transition
tag.
tag on Saquon. Because then if someone signs Saquon to a big deal, then you would just live with that and then
I
he would
think
walk.
I think that is a dangerous slope because then you're pitting them against one another and they're pretty united. You know what I'm saying? They don't get the same energy as like Dak and Zeke, but they're about as close. You know what I'm saying? So I think you have to accept it. My methodology is always like accept that you are going to have to pay the quarterback as soon as possible. The Rams did that. The Eagles did that. They were both able to get out of those deals. The Chiefs did that. That obviously worked out wonderfully for them. I hope this offseason, for logic's sake, the Bengals realize that, the Chargers realize that, and to some degree, the Dolphins realize that. Like, I don't necessarily believe in Tua the way you do, at least, but like you have this
Well, I'm
is
not a two and
you're
non guy to be clear.
but like that is a different example because like you're probably
And
never going to have a better chance to negotiate with him than now.
well,
So
yeah, I don't know even. I'm not really
but like
comfortable. I don't know.
okay.
I don't know if Tua should play football again, but yeah, it's a whole
Right.
nother
Well,
thing.
yeah. Like obviously, too, is has some significant extenuating circumstances. But assuming full health, clear health, that Tua wants to play football, some admittedly big assumptions, and you're the Dolphins, you have to get this deal done as soon as possible. The way the Chargers do, the way the Bengals do. And here's the other thing, Brandon, you're talking about. Well, just wait. We could sit here till we're blue in the face, big blue view in the face, and talk about how Daniel Jones is not as good of a quarterback as Herbert, as Burrow, as Lamar Jackson, if you believe in that. It doesn't matter. Those contracts are going to be variables that Daniel Jones's representation, his new representation, use in their arguments. You got to beat them. Like, I'm telling you, I watched the Eagles and the Rams and the Seahawks with Russell Wilson's extension. I watched all of them beat the Cowboys and Dak Prescott, and those only raised the price. You have to be the first. You have to get there as soon as possible.
But you should still draft someone. You should draft someone
Sure.
like on day 2 or day 3, like
You
what
should
the
draft
Eagles did
someone
with
in
Hurts.
general. I mean,
Yes.
Maybe don't do it if your quarterback is a little bit shaky from a confidence standpoint. It worked out for the Eagles, but like it also destroyed.
Oh no, I think that's great. Actually, I think it's good to do because then if they are, then you see that they can't handle it, and then it's time to move on.
You get my point, and it certainly worked out.
Yes.
Okay, let's get to the Commanders to wrap things up. No real new news except for the fact that Eric Bieniemy is now their offensive coordinator. There are obviously a lot of takes about this across the NFL universe. We didn't really touch on this on Monday because we just were kind of asking questions about the offseason as a whole. But you specifically wanted to talk about this. So Eric Bieniemy, Washington, whatever.
I think one thing you and I like to do is to assess the common take on things. And I think the common take, especially from what I've seen over at Hogshaven, sorry, Commanders fans, is like, oh, this is a great hire. Like, it's amazing. And it's just like, really? That's your take on this? Because
really,
there's none of that feels like there's none of this that feels maybe too good to be true. It's just like, of all the jobs that Eric Bieniemy could theoretically land, but apparently not actually land, like this is the one he jumps at because it's such a good opportunity to be Ron Rivera's lame duck offensive coordinator and to work with Sam Howell. Really? Like you think this is going to be like this massive turnaround for the franchise? This is a sign that the franchise is finally getting something right. Like I don't really. It's tough for me to come in and be like, well, you shouldn't be excited at all because you're fans. You want to be excited about something. I get that. You want to look on the bright side. I get that part of it. But just to like think like, oh, the Commanders got one over on everyone. They made a really good hire. I don't buy it. We've seen Eric Bieniemy be criticized before. He's actually, I just saw today, LaShawn McCoy, who played for the Chiefs.
Wow, I don't know that LaShawn McCoy's opinion is one that I value in today's day and age.
You take it for what it's worth.
Jamal Charles clapped back at LaShawn McCoy's take.
Okay, well, go. But like there's been some weird murmurs though about like Mahomes and Bieniemy over the years. And so here's the thing: once upon a time, with Doug Peterson, Andy Reid wanted to get him out of the building. Not because like he hated Doug, but there were some things that went on where he basically wanted to get Doug Peterson out. But like give him a soft landing in doing so. So Andy Reid was very heavily pushing the Eagles to hire Doug Peterson. Eagles obviously made their own choice, but Andy was like really pushing that a lot. And that was a big reason why Doug Peterson got hired. I think there was some of that going on here where like I don't think the Chiefs wanted to fire Eric Bieniemy because the optics of that are obviously awful, especially coming off another Super Bowl win. But I also don't think they were dying to keep him around. If they were dying to keep him around, they really could have kept him. If they thought he was so integral and they had to have him and he is this genius, they could have done that. And I don't think that was the case. Yes. I think there's some weird vibes going on there. And I don't know, man. I just maybe Bieniemy is being smart in terms of maybe he's looking at this as like, hey, I'll come in, I'll be the OC for this coach who might be headed out the door next year as new ownership is coming in. And then, hey, I'm a great internal candidate. Like maybe the offense does good, but the team kind of stinks as a whole, or the ownership just wants a change because they're new ownership. They don't really care about Ron Rivera, but they feel like Bieniemy, is a strong candidate because of his background. So maybe he's being smart on his end. But I have my reservations about this really being like a needle mover in Washington.
I mean, what is the common take to assess it? Like you're saying the common take among Commanders
the common
fans
take is like, how could this guy not get a head coach job? We're so lucky that we got him as our OC.
I think there's two different common takes, and which I guess destroys the spirit of the idea of a common take. There's the common take of Commanders fans who are obviously over the moon excited about it, and then there's the common take of like NFL fans and observers, right? Which is that this is ridiculous that Eric Bieniemy has been held back, has been discriminated against, that he hasn't had opportunities to be a head coach. I think I don't remember where I read this. I think it was The Athletic again that noted he has interviewed for a head coaching position 19 times. Do you know if that's correct off the top of your head?
I don't know. It's obviously a lot.
But over the Mahomes era, which is now 5 years old, he has interviewed obviously a number of different times for a number of different teams. I think he's actually interviewed for a few teams twice, just because they've had turnover in that time. I don't know. I don't. I mean, it's difficult to like square from a logical standpoint. Like, why would Eric Bieniemy want to leave Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes to go coach in Washington and Sam Howell if that's the plan? Obviously, that like that doesn't make sense. Like nobody can argue that makes sense. I know Eric Bieniemy is obviously arguing that. To your point, maybe he does believe that Ron Rivera, and like when you factor in that level, to this, that Ron Rivera could be out, right? That they could have new ownership, that there could be a new quarterback, right? Like there could be all sorts of turnover and change. Like it feels illogical in so many different ways. Maybe he does believe it's his only opportunity. That would be very sad and frustrating if he believed that was his only opportunity and only path towards becoming a head coach in the NFL. I think his resume speaks for itself. Like I know that there have been questions and whatever, from people who doubt him or whatever the case may be. I do think that people hold the fact that he doesn't call plays against him. I think that people use that in different ways against different people. And this isn't to make it a Cowboys Eagles thing, but it's like, well, Mike McCarthy doesn't call plays. Like, what a loser. Well, Nick Sirianni doesn't call plays and doesn't get that same energy. And again, I'm not trying to turn this into like a disparagement against Nick Sirianni, but like that becomes a variable for certain people and not for others. And a lot of it just is contingent upon team success. But even though the Chiefs have been successful, even though the offense has been successful, Eric Bieniemy seems to get no credit for that. I don't understand why that is.
I think this is the common take that I just wonder about. I think sometimes we think there's these things and it's like, oh, how is this possible? It's so unthinkable. Well, maybe there's more than what meets the eye.
Sure, I think that's possible.
If it's point where, I just feel like people don't account for that sometimes with different things. It used to be, there's different examples of this over the years. It used to be like, well, how could they possibly play Andy Dalton over Justin Fields? And I agree. I said, like, obviously, I don't think it's a smart future long-term decision to play Andy Dalton over Justin Fields, but clearly Justin Fields is like not looking awesome in practice. He's probably looking really bad, in fact, when he was a rookie, which is that a good reason why you should be playing Andy Dalton over Justin Fields? No, it's not. Again, that's the wrong long-term process, but it is a reason. It's not like just like random or unthinkable. And I feel like people act like in these situations, like it's just like totally random or totally unthinkable. Maybe Eric Bieniemy is not a really good interview. And also maybe he's not like as good of a coach that we think he is. How did Brian Leftwich, like everyone's like, oh, he's so great. Like he was being associated, like he was getting so much hype because of the Bucks and Tom Brady. Didn't really not suddenly not such a hot candidate this year with Brady kind of looking older and that offense taking a step back. Like I don't know. I'm not saying Bieniemy definitely sucks or anything, but I'm just saying like I'm not ready to definitely believe he's awesome.
I'm not either. I mean, like, I don't, I'm just interested. I'm interested to see him have an opportunity. And I think that's where like people's frustration comes from is like, and you mentioned Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson, obviously coming from Kansas City, didn't call offensive plays, got the opportunity. You mentioned the boost that he got, from Andy Reid. That's obviously a factor. Matt Nagy, you talk about Justin Fields, the Andy Dalton decision, came from Kansas City, didn't call offensive plays, got an opportunity. So like that was not held against them in the way it seems to be. And you're right. Like maybe he's, not a great interview. Maybe he's too great of an interview, like whatever. There's all sorts of ifs or whatever that we simply do not have the answers to. I do think it's fair as we get to the common take from the Commander side of things to be like, well, this is strange. Like this doesn't happen to us. But like, I'm excited. Like, I mean, it's the best possible. If we talk about the Commanders and like the result it has on their team, it's the best possible thing that could have happened to their offense, especially when you consider that it was previously Scott Turner calling it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an exciting hire relative to what they could have gotten. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm just like backtracking here because I said I felt like whoever they hired at this offensive coordinator would not be inspiring because of the situation, because it's a lame duck offensive coordinator job. And we just saw the Panthers go through this last year and they ended up with Ben McAdoo. I think that was the best they could do. So it just surprises me that they would be able to get Bieniemy in the situation. And I'm having a hard time, I guess, reconciling that against.
I think a lot of people are. And I think that's like I'm sure you've seen there's been a lot of like frustration and confusion. And I don't know if disheartenment is a word, but a lot of people feeling disheartened about this. And I think people are frustrated for Eric Bieniemy that he hasn't gotten an opportunity, that it's been 5 years at this point and he hasn't, I mean, I don't even know how many coaches have been hired. What is the average per year? 8, right? Like 8 openings a year generally. So you're talking about like somewhere between 30 and 40 positions have opened up. And I'm not saying he's interviewed for all of them, but if that number is right, if he's interviewed for 19, I mean, he's interviewed for half of the openings over the last 5 years. and that he can't get a job when we've seen other people get a job who are seemingly less
Yeah.
qualified or come from positions that are similar where the offense in this case isn't as successful. It's, so that's why, like, if I'm a Commanders fan, I'm thrilled. Like, maybe he comes in and has the exact same, success. And if that happens, then as Cowboys and Eagles fans, we should be pissed because now all of a sudden, if he is the future head coach, then they're in great hands.
Just to tie a bow on this, I'll just say, like, sometimes I feel like we should consider more angles when we reach a point when we're just throwing our hands up, like, how is this not happening? I agree that obviously there's elements of race in there, and obviously there have been candidates who've been less deserving who've gotten jobs. I'm not saying Eric Bieniemy shouldn't have, but I'm saying because he hasn't, like, it can't just be 100%. Oh, this is a total injustice and it's inexplicable. Like, I don't know about that. You know how sometimes, like, a player falls in the draft way further than expected? It's not always because they're a steal. It's sometimes because there's stuff behind the scenes that we don't always are privy to that are huge red flags that end up manifesting, and it's like, oh, that's why that player fell so far, because they have this, like, really
Yeah, like
degenerative knee or something, or like they're a
like
total
N'Kobe Dean a
jerk.
year ago when it was like, how is he still falling? Like, whatever, blah blah blah. And I mean,
It
like,
does have
I don't mean
and
to pick on the
sometimes
Eagles here, but like that's an example of a draft prospect. Like that day, it was like, what's going on with N'Kobe Dean right now?
Well, and sometimes it happens and it's not justified and everyone was dumb. I'm saying that's also possible, but I'm saying sometimes it's possible where there's a good reason for it. And with N'Kobe Dean, we don't fully know what his career is going to look like yet. He looks promising in limited flashes, but it's funny because when he fell to the Eagles at that spot, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, he's going to be a star from day one." And he didn't really even play it all this season. So sometimes, players fall or coaches aren't hired or whatever, and there's more going on than what meets the eye. I don't know. That's definitely the case to be true with the enemy, but I'm just saying I think you can't. It seems crazy to me to just be like, especially from an outsider perspective. If you're a Washington fan, go wild. But if from an outsider's perspective, it can't just be like, oh wow, amazing, A+ hire by Washington, no downside here at all. This is going to be great. That's just like, it just seems weird to me to act like there's no kind of mystery or question with the situation.
You mentioned the LaShawn McCoy I guess, like, question about Eric Bieniemy. And again, like, obviously I'm a Cowboys fan, so I have a little bit of a bias there, but I don't think that LaShawn McCoy has said anything that I personally agree with this offseason in terms of analysis, but whatever. And I mentioned that Jamal Charles clapped back at him and mentioned that in his experience with Eric Bieniemy, he was a wonderful coach and is deserving of an NFL head coaching opportunity. Right now, as you were speaking, Tyreek Hill tweeted, and he literally, it was literally like 30 seconds ago. He tweeted, "Shady, mad. Eric Bieniemy told him tuck that ball," with a like a crying, laughing emoji.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean his resume speaks for itself, and like we've said, like many coaches have gotten hired for much less than he's accomplished with the Chiefs. So they're a better team with Eric Bieniemy. I don't know what their ceiling is. I don't know what the future has in store, but they are a better team and a better offense with him, even if Sam Howell is the quarterback. So that sucks. I feel like both the Giants and Commanders are getting better as the mixtape like moves along. We're 100 episodes in, and they're much better than they were at episode 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another reason why, like, the Eagles not winning the Super Bowl, frustrating. It's like the division's getting better. And it's like, hey, can the Eagles get back to the Super Bowl? Like, yeah, in theory, but there hasn't even been a repeat NFC East winner. So, like, you can't just assume that's going to happen. You can't just assume they're going to get back to the Super Bowl when you can't even assume they're definitely going to win the division 2 years in a row. I think they can, to be clear. But someone is eventually going to be that team to break that. But it's not a given. There's no givens in the NFL, and especially in this division.
It is a precious opportunity to be in the Super Bowl. Like, and you used the word, and I think you would agree that it was a failure. It would be a failure if the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl. Now, it's a failure contextually, right? Like, it's a failure given the opportunity. Like, it's not a failure in the same way it's a failure for the Bears to not win the Super Bowl. But it, you're right there. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, to your point, the Eagles have only been to 4 Super Bowls, right, in franchise history. So, like,
yeah,
it's really hard. Like, it's really, really, really hard to get to them. And so I don't mean to pile on or pour salt in the wound, but yeah. So Seamus, if you made it through this podcast, good job.
I don't think he has. With all due respect, we love Seamus, but still taking a break.
Anything else as we wrap up volume 100?
I guess we should have had a special guest on, but we didn't, so that's good. How about some people tweet at us if they want to hear What any guest ideas that people want to hear
Besides
from?
Jimmy, we're working on it. Jimmy will be on at some point in time. Don't worry, but we know that one.
Give
Yeah,
us
who
some
else?
guest ideas that you want to hear from. Obviously, I would love to get Tio on at some point.
I saw
Review the
he
Tio
posted about the
wine.
wine thing. Yeah, we
Yeah.
got to figure that out. So,
Tio is one. Jimmy will get Jimmy on at some point. Obviously, we'll check in on the Commanders and the Giants. Those are givens, but any good guest ideas, and we'll try to make it happen. And be ambitious. Shoot for the moon. We'll try to make it happen.
you see the
LeBron
moon up there?
James.
I'm gonna throw a lasso around it and bring it on down to you. I finally
There
watched
you
that
go.
movie for the first time this past Christmas season.
What
Do you know
movie?
what that is? You don't know? It's A Wonderful
Bruce
Life.
Almighty.
Wow, hadn't thought about that movie in a long time. Okay, as we leave, the whole thing that led to the lasagna conversation was I asked Jeremy to promise us something he would eat before the week was over. So, Brandon, I would like you to promise us something that you will watch before
I'll
next week's
watch.
mixtape. Yeah, it could be anything. You could be like the local news. So something that you promise to watch on your
That's exciting.
television before next week.
Probably, I started watching Bad Batch, the Star
Okay.
Wars, Clone Wars, kind of whatever spinoff. I watched the first couple episodes, but I kind of forgot to stay with it, so I want to catch up on that.
Okay. Bad Batch it is. My wife and I have been watching like big time franchises as of late. So like the last like year and a half or so, we watched all the Harry Potters, we watched all the Lord of the Rings, we watched all the Star Wars. I think the next one up, we wanted to watch and we're going to watch the Jurassic Parks. That feels more like a summary thing to me. Like I don't know if it's like that they're in the jungle, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel right like with the time of year. So I think Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't even know how many movies there are anymore. Like there are a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean.
5, I think.
I think there are 6. Like that's my
6,
guess.
5 or
but
6, yeah.
but yeah, this is the last thing I'm gonna say. That is the best soundtrack of a movie. Like as far as like just a score, like that's just music, no words, no singing. That is the best soundtrack that any movie has.
Hold on to your butts.